In the early 19th century, the young United States of America found itself embroiled in a conflict that would shape its history and define its identity. The War of 1812, a forgotten war that was fought on multiple fronts, from the battlefields of North America to the high seas of the Atlantic Ocean. The War of 1812 was a conflict between the United States and Great Britain that lasted from 1812 to 1815. It was sparked by a combination of factors, mainly trade disputes, impressment of American sailors, and British support of Native American tribes in the Northwest Territory. In the early 19th century, tensions between the United States and Great Britain were high. Britain was at war with Napoleonic France and wanted to hinder trade with their enemy. Under the authority of the Orders in Council, the Royal Navy seized American ships that were trading with France. In addition to taking the cargo, the British impressed merchant crews to fill out the crews of its own chronically undermanned warships. According to the USS Constitution Museum, the British seized some 400 American merchant ships and their cargoes between 1807 and 1812, and swept up 6,000 to 9,000 Americans into the crews of British ships between 1803 and 1812. Some of the British possessions had migrated to the United States, while many others had attained citizenship that was either in question or simply cannot be documented. The British encroachment of American rights through the Orders in Council and seizing of American goods and seamen, as well as news of British arming hostile Native American tribes, pushed the United States to war. On June 18, 1812, President James Madison declared war on Great Britain. With only a meager 16 warships to its name, the United States could not directly take on the British Royal Navy of some 500 vessels in 1812. Instead, the U.S. looked north, hoping to use the conquest of Canada, a British territory, as an incentive to win concessions on maritime issues. Many Americans assumed that the Canadian conquest would be very simple and low casualty. It was even widely believed that American troops would be welcomed as liberators. Former President Thomas Jefferson even stated, "It marching." After all, America did have a severe population advantage, about 7.7 million to 500,000. American troops invaded Canada in 1812 at 3 points. The conquest, however, did not go as planned. The British and their allies from indigenous nations in North America proved a formidable foe. All three campaigns ended in failure. Most infamously, the army of General William Hull surrendered at Detroit at the western end of Lake Erie. A second army surrendered at Queenston Heights at the other end of the lake, and a third army withdrew after a little more than a skirmish north of New York. Recovering from their defeat, a similar multi-pronged invasion was launched in 1813. With American victory on Lake Erie paving the way for the land victory at Thames in Upper Canada, U.S. ascendancy was restored throughout the region. Further east, however, American forces made little headway. In 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated and exiled for the first time. This allowed the British to put additional resources and attention over to the war in America. The U.S. was able to remain offensive in the Niagara front, but the bloody fighting remained inconclusive. Elsewhere, the British went on the offensive. The British gained control of D.C. and burned down, including the White House and Capitol building. The British also retained control of 100 miles of the coast of Maine. Elsewhere, however, the British were repulsed. British forces withdrew from New York when they lost another pivotal inland naval battle on Lake Champlain. They then were forced to give up Baltimore when they were unable to compel Fort McHenry to submit, which battle resulted in the writing of the future national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Finally, they were decisively defeated on New Orleans in the final battle of the war. If the ground war didn't go as well for the Americans as intended, the naval victories certainly made up for it. Early in the war, the new nation won several single-ship and British warships. Most noteworthy were the 4 successful cruises made by the USS Constitution in the war. The frigate outran a large British squadron in 1812 and subsequently defeated 4 Royal Navy ships in combat. After a duel with the HMS Guerriere, the USS Constitution earned the nickname Old Ironside, after a round shot by the HMS Guerriere seemed to bounce off the 22-inch thick hull. U.S. privateers also took a toll on the British shipping. In the end, the British Navy held. They shipped troops to Canada to reinforce and supply the army, and successfully held a blockade along the American coast. The blockade had a devastating impact on the United States economy and held most American warships in port. Furthermore, by the end of the war, the British won 3 single-ship duels against USS Chesapeake, USS Essex, and the USS President, evening the score from earlier on in the war. Ultimately, the war was concluded in a draw on the battlefield. The Treaty of Ghent was signed in the modern-day Belgium on December 24, 1814, and went into effect on February 17, 1815. The treaty re-established the antebellum borders of Canada and the United States. The British lifted their trade restrictions and stopped aiding Native American rebellions. Both sides could claim victory to the war, but after the decisive forces at New Orleans, most Americans saw the war as a victory, and this stirred nationalism around the country. Although the war did not end with the annexation of Canada, much was gained. America could now expand westward with little resistance. Prominent war heroes such as future presidents Andrew Jackson and William Henry Harrison were created. Most importantly, America established itself as an independent and major player on the world stage. As stated best by the British diplomat Augustus J. Foster at the war's end, the Americans have brought us to speak of them with respect.